Two people can earn the exact same salary their entire life and end up hundreds of thousands of dollars apart in net worth. Same job, same paycheck, completely different outcome. The difference isn't luck, and it isn't some secret investment only rich people know about. It comes down to a handful of moves stacked in the right order that most people either skip or do way too late. This video breaks down every single one of them and the order they actually need to happen in. Picture a woman in her 30s who does everything her parents told her to do. She works a stable job. She puts $1,500 into a savings account every single month. No debt, no fancy spending. By most standards, she's responsible. 5 years pass. She checks her balance, $90,000 sitting there. She feels proud. Then she goes to buy the same car she looked at 5 years ago. It now costs $12,000 more. That's inflation. It's the rise in prices over time, meaning the same dollar buys less stuff next year than it does today. Her $90,000 didn't grow in a way that matters. It grew in number, but shrank in power. Here's the math. If inflation sits around 4% a year, and her money sits in a savings account earning less than 1%, she is losing roughly 3% of her buying power every single year. On $90,000, that's over $2,700 in silent losses. Every year, forever, as long as the money stays parked. This is the first thing almost nobody explains. Saving money is not the same as growing money. Saving protects what you have. Growing requires putting that money somewhere it can outpace the leak. So where does it go instead? That's where most people hit a wall, because the next step feels intimidating, wrapped in words that sound like they belong in a bank boardroom, not a normal person's life. Before we get to where money should go, there's a bigger issue sitting underneath all of this. A man in his 40s, let's call him a typical office worker, spends 15 years climbing the ladder at the same company. Raises come slow, 2% here, 3% there. He does the math one night and realizes something uncomfortable. His salary has grown by less than 30% over 15 years. Meanwhile, rent, groceries, and gas near him have nearly doubled. He's not lazy. He's not bad with money. He's stuck on what's called an income ceiling, a limit on how much money you can make from one single source, no matter how hard you work inside it. A job has a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day, and only so much a company will pay one person, no matter how good they are. This is why net worth rarely grows fast from salary alone. And this is the part that changes everything once people finally see it. Growing net worth fast almost never comes from one source. It comes from stacking sources on top of each other, so that if one grows slowly, the others carry the weight. Now here's a question worth sitting with. If income alone won't do it, and savings accounts are quietly losing value, what actually works? Stick around, because the next part is where the real gap between broke and wealthy shows up. And it has almost nothing to do with how much someone earns. Let's pause and say the real target plainly, because it's easy to lose track of it. The goal isn't to make more money and watch it sit still. The goal is to build a system where money multiplies on its own, faster than prices rise, faster than a single paycheck ever could. Every year, someone waits to start this system. They don't just lose a year of growth. They lose years of growth on top of growth, because of something called compounding, which is when money earns money, and then that new money earns money too. Here's a real example of how brutal that gap gets. Two people, same age, 25 years old. The first person invests $200 a month starting immediately and stops entirely after 10 years. The second person waits 10 years, then starts investing that same $200 a month and never stops for the next 25 years, assuming an average return of 8% a year, which is close to the long-term average of the stock market. The first person, who only invested for 10 years, ends up with more money than the second person, who invested for 25 years straight. The first ends near $200,000. The second, despite putting in far more total cash, ends up behind. That's not a trick. That's what happens when time gets a head start on money. This is the piece almost nobody explains clearly, and it's why waiting even a few years to start feels harmless, but actually costs tens of thousands of dollars down the road. So the next question becomes obvious. Where does that early money actually go? Before any of that works, there's a wall a lot of people are standing behind without realizing it. Bad debt. Not all debt is the same, and mixing them up is one of the most expensive mistakes someone can make. Picture someone carrying $8,000 on a credit card with a 24% interest rate. Interest is the extra money a lender charges for letting you borrow theirs. If that person only makes minimum payments, they could end up paying back nearly double the original amount over several years, just in interest. Compare that to a mortgage, a loan used to buy buy a house, sitting at 6% interest on an asset that historically rises in value over time. One debt is draining the person. The other is helping build something. The math makes the priority obvious. No investment reliably returns 24% a year. Paying off that credit card first is, in a very real sense, a guaranteed 24% return, because that's the rate being avoided going forward. Nothing else on this list beats that, so the order matters. High-interest debt gets crushed first. Then, and only then, does the real building begin. Now picture someone who finally clears that debt. They feel free. But freedom without a plan just turns into new spending. And that's the trap waiting right on the other side of debt payoff. So what should that freed up money actually go toward? Here's where most people expect something exciting. It isn't. The most reliable way to grow net worth fast over time is boring. And that's exactly why it works. It doesn't require guessing, timing, or luck. It's called an index fund, which is a single investment that holds tiny pieces of hundreds of different companies at once instead of betting on just one. A popular one tracks the 500 biggest companies in the country. Historically, that fund has returned close to 10% a year on average, before adjusting for inflation. Here's the story that shows why this beats trying to pick winners. A man spends 3 years researching individual companies, buying and selling based on news headlines and hot tips from online forums. After 3 years, his portfolio is up 11% total. His neighbor, who put the same amount into a basic index fund and never touched it, is up 34% in that same period without ever picking a single stock. The neighbor didn't get lucky. He avoided the two things that quietly destroy most investors: panic selling when prices drop and chasing trends after they've already peaked. The math rewards patience more than it rewards effort. Let's run real numbers. Someone investing $500 a month into an index fund averaging 9% a year will cross the $100,000 mark in about 11 years. Push that same monthly amount out to 25 years, and it crosses $500,000, with less than half of that total coming from money they actually put in. The rest is growth building on growth. That gap between what you put in and what you end up with, that's the part banks and financial products rarely explain clearly, because a customer who understands compounding needs a lot less help from anyone selling something. But investing alone still isn't the fastest path. There's a piece most people skip completely, and it's sitting in almost every paycheck. Picture two coworkers, same salary, same job. One of them puts money into a retirement account at work up to the point where the company matches it. A match is when an employer adds extra money into that account based on how much the employee puts in themselves, essentially free money for participating. The other coworker skips it, saying they'll start later once things feel more stable financially. 10 years pass. The one who used the match has tens of thousands of dollars more, not just from the growth of the investments, but from years of free employer money that got invested and compounded right alongside it. The other coworker left that money on the table permanently. It doesn't come back. There's no catching up on match money you never claimed. This is one of the fastest legal ways to grow net worth immediately, because the return is instant. If an employer matches 50 cents for every dollar put in, that's an instant 50% return before the investment has even had a chance to grow on its own. So between the index fund, the employer match, and paying off destructive debt, a real system starts to form. But there's still one more piece missing, and it's the one that lets people grow money faster than a single salary ever could, no matter how disciplined they are with saving. Growing net worth fast isn't about one big move. It's about building a small machine made of several parts: debt elimination, consistent investing, employer matching, all running at the same time instead of one after another. But there's a new problem sitting underneath all of it now. Every one of those pieces still depends on one paycheck. If that paycheck stops, for any reason, layoffs, injury, a shift in the industry, the whole machine slows down or stops completely. That's the real risk hiding behind an otherwise solid plan. This is where a second income stream changes everything, and it doesn't need to be complicated or huge to matter. Picture a woman who spends 2 hours a week, not 40, just 2, offering a skill she already has, like writing or organizing, to a few small local businesses online. She's not trying to replace her job. She's trying to add a second small engine next to the first one. At first, it's slow, $100 one month, then $200 the next. After a year, it's a reliable $600 a month on the side. That's not life-changing on its own. But when that $600 gets added directly into the investing engine already running, Instead of getting spent, it can shave years off the timeline to real wealth. Adding just $200 extra a month into that same 9% index fund on top of the original $500 doesn't just add a little. Over 25 years, that extra $200 a month adds close to $200,000 by itself, because it's compounding the entire time right alongside the rest. Small second incomes aren't about getting rich from the side hustle itself, they're about feeding the machine that's already working in the background. So now the pieces are stacking, debt gone, investing running, employer match claimed, a second income feeding it all. What's left is the part almost nobody talks about because it doesn't feel like growing money at all. It feels like protecting it, and protection is exactly what determines whether any of this actually lasts. Here's a story that shows why this last piece matters so much. A family spends 15 years building close to $200,000 in net worth, mostly through the same steps already covered. Then, a medical emergency hits. No insurance covering it properly. In 18 months, half of that net worth is gone, not from bad decisions, but from a single event nobody planned for. This is the piece that separates people who build wealth from people who build wealth and then lose it. An emergency fund, a stash of easily accessible cash covering 3 to 6 months of basic expenses, isn't exciting. It won't grow at 9% a year. But it's the only piece on this list whose entire job is making sure everything else survives contact with real life. Without it, people are forced to sell investments at the worst possible time, right when an emergency hits, often when markets are also down, locking in losses that never needed to happen. With it, the machine keeps running no matter what life throws at it. So here's the full system, stacked together the way it's actually meant to work. High interest debt first, because nothing else beats a guaranteed return that high. Claim every dollar of employer match available because it's free money that starts compounding the moment it's claimed. Build a small emergency fund so one bad month can't undo years of progress. Put consistent money into a simple, diversified index fund and leave it alone, because patience beats prediction almost every time. And build at least one small second income stream, not to get rich from it directly, but to feed the machine faster than one paycheck ever could alone. None of these pieces are exciting on their own. None of them involve guessing the next big stock or timing the market perfectly. But stacked together, running at the same time instead of one after another, they solve the exact problem from the start of this video. The silent leak stops draining money because it's finally growing faster than prices rise. The income ceiling stops being a trap because it's no longer the only source. And the years lost to waiting stop piling up because the machine is already running. Remember the two people from earlier, the one who started early and stopped versus the one who waited and never caught up? The difference between them was never how much money they had to start with. It was simply whether the machine was running or sitting still. The only real mistake left to make now is knowing all of this and closing the tab anyway. The machine doesn't need to be big to start. It just needs to start.